Okay, I think we will start. It's 2 minutes past 12. Thank you very much for joining us. Good afternoon. I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO here at the CCMA, and welcome to one of the last events in the hybrid working series. The last one is actually next Wednesday, which is a members only event. It's our Q3 seminar where we're focusing on operations and we're going to be talking about recruitment again, as well as finding out from a number of organisations where they have reached in their approach to this new way of working, including Sage, Bupa, Ascensos and Camden Council. And during that session, we're going to be moving the conversation on. We're going to be looking at what the emerging challenges are and the opportunities that are coming out from this new hybrid way of working. But for now, today is all about the impact of hybrid working on resource planning. And to help us, we've invited Ed Creasy, an old friend of the CCMA, who has, Ed, 28 years experience in the contact centre industry, and you're now at Calabrio.
Less of the old, please. But yeah, but yeah, I think 92 was when I started.
Wow, my goodness. And I know, Ed, you've got a complete mix of insights and debate. And I know that that you're going to be inviting people to join in the debate using the Q&A functionality. So I know you've got a packed agenda, and I know you've got a couple of people that are joining us, including Jonathan Tristan, who is the resource planning manager at Gallagher Insurance.
Yep.
So my job is just to make sure you finish on the hour. So for now, I'm going to hand over to you, Ed.
Wonderful. So I'm going to share my screen. I hope it's the right screen.
Perfect.
That's the right one. Excellent. So thank you, Lee. Yes, my name is Ed. I'm going to be the host of a conversation today about hybrid working, but really focusing on planning. And I'm delighted to have two proper experts with me who I'm going to introduce shortly. There's been a lot of discussions around this topic, but today, please be assured it's not going to be the same old. We're going to really laser focus on workforce management. So, but before we start, I'd like to talk briefly about something we're all facing in this world, which is going back to work. Now, before I play the video, and it's Dutch, but it's got subtitles, which so don't worry. I want to tell you about the first meeting I went to after many months of working in the shed, as you're seeing me in the shed today. It was a complete disaster. Firstly, I went on the wrong day. So a colleague of mine commented about how smart I looked. What had actually happened is I'd ironed my whole shirt, not just the front of my shirt. And I said, well, we're meeting today. And he went, no, we're not. We're meeting next week. So I got the wrong day. So then a week later, I ironed all of my shirt again, and I went off and got to the hotel in Reading where we're meeting. It was like nothing was there. There was tumbleweed going across this hotel. Rang them up. They said, no, we're in Newbury. So I got completely the wrong town. And then we did have a meeting, and I parked up and I saw my colleagues, and it was lovely. And then they checked and said, did you book your parking? And I said, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, but I didn't. I've actually booked the wrong car. So if any of you are struggling with going back to work, I relate to it. And I'm going to play you a quick video in two parts. We're going to play a bit more later of how challenging I think we're all finding this.
Gaan ook veel volwassenen voor de eerste keer terug naar kantoor. Ik wil niet.
Allee, je gaat alle vriendjes terugzien. Luc, Rita, Mark. Ah, kijk, daar is Steve van de accounting ook. Heb je uw broodjes?
Ja.
Hier nog een koek.
Ah wel. Dag Frank.
Wat zeggen we dan? Dag leidinggevende.
Dag leidinggevende.
Hij is een beetje zenuwachtig.
Ik ben eigenlijk ook een beetje zenuwachtig. Maar we gaan van alle toffe dingen doen vandaag. We gaan spreadsheets maken. We gaan vergaderen over de kwartaalcijfers.
Ik moet trouwens ook weg, want wij hebben WO en de nieuwe themakaft wordt uitgelegd.
Ah, voilà. Zie. Zeg, wie heeft er zin in een lekker tasje koffie? Kom. Hey, ik kom straks wel terug.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see how he did on his first day at work later. So we're going to look at 6 topics today, and each topic we're going to have a panel discussion. Most of them we're going to have a poll as well, so we'll hopefully give you really valuable insight, but also we'll collect a load of data that we're going to share with you as well. The agenda, it looks quite packed, but you know, we're going to go through at a good pace. So we're going to start with not just the evolution of how we got here, because we've talked about that a lot, but actually look at, you know, what's our prediction of what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. Fear, you know, it sounds negative, but I don't think it's all good news. You know, a lot of vendors like ourselves keep saying that it's all good news. So what are our fears? There's some hot off the press research, which is known as the Great Resignation. I think we're seeing in the national news about lots of resourcing challenges in all industry, but it's impacting us. So we want to talk about that. Productivity, we're going to look at, has it increased everywhere? There's a general feeling it has, but really has it, and why has it increased? Benefits, quick check on what we mean by hybrid, and then we're going to discuss actually some of the more sort of specific technical tools like flexible scheduling. Housekeeping wise, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. Put a hashtag question or a hashtag tip if you just want to share some advice to the group, and we'll pick those up as we go into discussion. And as I say, you know, there's polling throughout. Okay, so introductions. Graham and Johnny, if you want to get your videos on and unmute yourselves, and let's do a quick intro. So Graham, do you want to give the audience a quick intro?
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name's Graham Meikle. I'm a senior WFM consultant at Calabrio with Ed. Previous to that, I'm not quite as experienced as Ed. I'm about 7 or 8 years short, but I'm close, you know. Lots of planning experience. Did the standard, started off in a call center as an agent, and someone said, you know how to use Excel, and that was the end of my career, you know. Started all the way through now to where I am now. I've been with Calabrio about 2 years and been working really hard around kind of implementing the WFM, and especially through lockdown has been really interesting, changing the approach to the way that we implement the systems, and also changing the way that we implement schedules and kind of the way that we have to get the system to perform in different ways.
Cool. Thanks, Graham. And as you could tell, that was my dog who's decided she wants to come into my office. So apologies, everyone. Johnny, please introduce yourself. Johnny, can you hear us?
Sorry, I was talking away then, once no one could hear. Apologies. I'll start again. So I come with 11 years experience in resource planning, clearly not on webinars, but definitely in resource planning. I started my life at RBS working on the phones as a telephony advisor, and kind of worked my way up really into real time, then into capacity planning, then worked for Vitality for a number of years, doing all aspects of planning. So fairly kind of experienced in scheduling, real time, capacity planning, budgeting, and now I currently work for the Bollington Wilson Group as resource planning manager. And as we all know on this call, the last kind of year or so has been incredibly tough, challenging. But it's helped us think of different ways of scheduling and working with the contact center in order to try and get the best out of what's been a pretty rubbish situation over the past 12 months.
Awesome. Thanks, both of you. And again, apologies about my dog who doesn't understand webinars particularly well. Okay, so we're gonna kick off with evolution, and if any of you aren't old enough to remember Larson or the Far Side, have a look, search them up online. They are the best cartoons, and I love this one of a great moment in evolution when they knock their ball up onto the island. So unlike the millions of years of evolution that that we had as humans, it's just suddenly happened, didn't it? After many years of talking about remote working and cloud, it suddenly happened. there's lots of versions of this data. You'd have seen it everywhere. We know the story, you know, pre-pandemic, 1 in 3 working remotely and 72% committing to long-term, post-pandemic, 9 in 10, and 85% committed to flexible hours. So what we're going to do is now, and this is when I have to multitask, which is always going to be a challenge as I am male, I'm going to start a poll. So what we'll do is the poll will come on screen. I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer it. In this case, we're going to actually do 2. And we're going to compare it to some actual data we've done. So the first question is what percentage of your organization are hybrid, which what we really mean by that is not how much time they're spending between locations, is actually what percentage of your staff are splitting time between the office and home. So this idea of hybrid. So the choices are, you know, is it 70 to 100%, 30 to 69%, 10 to 29, or less than 10%. So that's the first question. And then we'll have a look at the results. And then we're going to say, what do you think it's going to be like in 2 to 3 years' time? So let me generate the poll. Okay. Now it's showing the results. Relaunch poll. Okay, technical. Yeah, technical problem already. Let's try it again. Hopefully the poll's on the screen. Can someone tell me that's on the screen properly?
Yes, it is. It's fine, Ed.
Okay. I think I've launched both of them without realizing it. So as long as that's from people on the call, as long as that's work that you can answer both questions, then we'll be able to end the poll in about 10 seconds. I blame the dog entirely for putting me off my flow. Okay, I'll give you about another 10 more seconds. It looks like we've got most people participating, about 60 answers. Okay, a couple more seconds and I'm going to end the poll. Right, and share results. And again, can we confirm we've got the results on the screen?
Yes, they are. Interesting.
Okay. All right, let's have a look. So what percentage are remote some of the time today? So we've got 43% are 70 to 100, 39% 30 to 69, and just, well, combined 18% who are less than 30%. So, Graham, what are your thoughts about this as a benchmark?
Yeah, that pretty much falls in line, I think, roughly where we were thinking. You know, there's obviously a high percentage compared to where we were before, you know, pre-pandemic. I think if we were looking at this pre-pandemic, we were probably most would fit into that 10 to 29%, you know, whereas now we've clearly had a big shift. Absolutely.
Johnny, any other thoughts?
Yeah, same thing really, and I'm already intrigued by the second question as well, as the fact that we think that that's going to continue as well into the future.
Yeah.
And actually look to increase, which is interesting.
Agreed. And I think what we're looking at here, if you look at the second pile, we've got, you know, effectively 95% who would be at least, you know, more than 30, with only 5%, you know, less than 30%. So yeah, I think what we're all agreeing on here is that the trend is going to stay strong and get stronger. Now I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully we'll be back on the slides. Great. Are we seeing now the data?
Yes, it's looking good, Ed.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So we've taken some data from a range of surveys. This is one actually from Capgemini. It's available online. The remote workforce survey, and it shows how hybrid working changed for good. So before COVID, 83% of companies had less than 30% working hybrid. Currently, it's transformed. It's 20% and anticipated to be 26% in 2 to 3 years. So I think what we're seeing is the trend being my dog is now here dropping a ball. She wants me to throw a ball. This is going so well. So I think what we're seeing is the trends that we found are very similar to the trends in the market. Johnny, Graham, any questions? Any comments on that?
But
Go on,
Johnny,
Graham. I don't think it's surprising, to be honest, from what I've experienced anyway. I think that there's almost now, after kind of what we've gone through, that sort of expectation that remote working is on the cards in most organizations. It's certainly questions that we have when we have new people coming in. It's one of the questions they have kind of straight away now is that an option for me? Or even at interview stage, is that an option for me?
Yeah, I'd agree with what Johnny's saying there as well. It's the poll results reflected are pretty similar to this. In fact, the poll results from this actually said it was going to enhance even more than where we are now, and that might just be a difference in time from when this was run by Capgemini till to now. You know, that people are kind of embedded with the idea now that it's more common. I think later on when we start to touch on kind of attrition, that's going to come out as one of the main reasons why now, because people want the variation, they want to choose. So.
Absolutely. And even beyond contact center, we see this in our business. Whereas in the past, we might be saying to our teams, you're going to be traveling 80% of the time. It's a different world now for us. Okay, well, let's move on into a couple of discussion points. So let's start off with what were the risks for that previous evolution of workforce management. So Graham, if we think about where we were beforehand, what do you think was stopping us?
I think there's a few reasons. Partly technology. You know, it was a big investment for companies to move to VoIP or move to kind of internet-based rather than off of PBX. So there was some technology challenges there. There was also challenges around workforce management and kind of keeping people, especially if you're on Excel sheets, things like that. That's hard, you know. I think there were other elements kind of just around people management as well, like kind of how were you going to be able to visualize how much work they were completing? Could you trust what they were going to be doing, the quality they were going to be doing, and how would you be able to monitor that? And I think all of them things combined kind of meant that it was a big resistance towards it, you know, so.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly slightly off subject, but it's definitely still an issue, is that visibility. I'm picking up with a lot of customers who are saying now what they, you know, having people there and all the things you could do when people were there, people are beginning to feel that. But that's a quality management webinar. We'll move on. Johnny, let's talk about what were the risks. Can you think back to when before the pandemic and the risk you were considering and what held you back?
Yeah, I think it was just the fact that there just wasn't the appetite for it because of some of the things that Graham mentioned. I think from a management point of view, it was just that, especially for contact centers, is that you work in a contact center that's office based and that's that. Yeah. There was no kind of, that was the norm. And what one thing that has, you know, definitely changed that is what we've gone through. I think the other thing from our point of view, as well as the system side of it, of productivity and ensuring that, you know, we're getting the right levels of productivity of people working from home compared to the office, but also from an engagement point of view, as well as how do we keep the workforce engaged when they're not in the office. So if you're in a sales environment or a sales call center and you have that, you know, that banter across the team and competitions and stuff, and how do you recreate that outside of the office space was another concern of ours.
Yeah, and I think a third one, maybe I wouldn't mind you commenting on, and it's linked to what you've just said, is what about demographics? I know there's a big kickback on cliche, so I'm not going to say the M word, or I'm not going to say generation A, B, C, D, E, but have you seen that there's a new cohort of staff or a new set of expectations coming in from employees where actually, you know, this is as important or more important than salary and having the right flexible working?
We've certainly seen that in terms of, and I know we've got the discussion points coming in terms of attrition and stuff and things that we're seeing at the moment, but that's definitely one of the things that we're really keen to carry on with, is this hybrid working, in order to try and retain staff that actually it's not just about salary, it's about that work-life balance, and people in the main, you know, have a better work-life balance, being able to work in a hybrid environment. So it's made a big difference to us, definitely.
Cool. And Graham, anything you've seen in your consulting work across customers around how effective it's been with for different demographics?
Nothing in particular, like kind of that separates that way. I think the rise of kind of COVID itself, a lot of people were forced into new technology they probably never thought they were capable of using. So I don't know about many people on this call, but I have conversations with like my mother all the time on now using Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp Messenger, you know, where it's video calls. And before COVID, I would never have seen a face until I've met them face to face in between. And I think that just general use day to day kind of just embeds the culture and technology into people, so they kind of have that expectation that it's possible to work from home the same way.
Yeah, I think it's incredible how normalized it's become. So, but look, let's we've got some really meaty subjects to get into. So let's move on into fear. So I love this article. I won't. You don't have to read it out, but you know, as you can tell, my dog spends a lot of time with me, and my dog is desperate for me not to leave her. Whereas the cat, you know, we all know what cats are like. If I died, she'd probably just eat me. You know, so the cat is desperate for me to leave. So let's dig into some data on fears. I think this is quite interesting, actually. It's the Capgemini research. Pressure to remain available. I don't know what your record is. My record was 18 meetings in a day, and I sort of shuffled up the garden where I work in my shed, just like a shadow of the man I never was. Another thing that's interesting is this data you can see here about people thinking it will shrink their network. And it will hamper career growth. There's actually good research on that, saying that there's people in the office who can network with the senior management who like to be in the office, actually get more advancement historically. And then there's other issues like penalization for productivity. We've seen concerns like that in our organization, right through to losing the job. So we're going to have another discussion now before we go back and see the end of our video. Let's start with you, Johnny. What sort of fears have you seen during this period?
Really, from a contact center point of view, we found that most of the agents, it's just in terms of productivity, and then team managers, how they manage them people remotely, because it happened so quickly, and we all had to move so fast that trying to get some of these processes and things in place and getting the management team kind of where they need to be in terms of support and how we can do that from an agile environment. And you know, it was quite tough, but we've managed to get over that now. And I think that was like I say, the biggest fear that we kind of experienced from that. Definitely.
Okay. And Graham, anything you've seen with the clients you've been working with?
Yeah, I think the main fear is that you're adding almost another dimension to the WFM side, like the scheduling, and that element's like fairness, you know, around making sure that everyone's treated right for the role that they're going to be doing, and that requires some compassionate leadership as well as some engagement from the staff to do that. And I think that's the kind of main balance, is that it's seen as being unfair that someone gets to do something when someone else doesn't, etc. And finding the way to communicate that and keep that trust and keep that kind of that open communication is key to it.
Yeah, I think fairness is a big trend. I have a completely virtual team, so it's very simple for us. Is we're all virtual, and that's it, from Australia to Scotland to Singapore. Whereas when you have these partial teams where people might be prejudiced when they're out of the office all the time, I think, and we'll talk later about what role process and people and technology can have in that. Well, let's. I'm sure you're all dying to see what happened when our Dutch friend, I think they're Dutch, returned from a day at work. So let me just play this for you.
En hoe was het?
Superleuk. Kijk, ik heb het vergaderrapport mogen uittypen.
Amai, heb jij dat gemaakt?
Ja. Steve heeft wel een ongelukje gehad. Kijk.
En omdat je zo flink bent geweest, gaan we vanavond spaghetti eten en gaan we naar de afspraak kijken.
Yes! En wie zijn de gasten?
Mia Doornaert.
Ah, weer al.
Okay, let's move on.
Ik kan ook veel
strange recommendations. Okay, so let's move on to the Great Resignation, which is an interesting trend we have seen come up. So it's hitting contact centers hard. Gallup have done some research quite recent in July 2021 around America's working population that's saying 48% were actively looking for a job. Agents are seeing the impact, and agents have ranked that agent shortages and agent retention as the top challenge that's hitting them. Now, the good news, which is in relative terms, is that when you look at contact center agents, 1 in 3, like to seek new employment. So there's definitely an issue here, and what we're seeing from the data is it's not a money problem. So 18% of agents are citing higher pay, which is traditionally really the challenge we faced. Ultimately, it's looking like greater happiness, greater engagement is what agents are looking for. So I think the final thing is what the data we're seeing is reflecting on Gallup's conclusion that it takes a 20% pay increase to lure away an engaged or satisfied worker, but it takes next to nothing to poach a disengaged worker. And we've seen research all over the place around engagement. So it seems to be there's a trend of saying we need to prioritize agent retention or face a cycle of attrition. With that in mind, we're going to do another polling question. Let me see if this will work more effectively. So let me go to poll 2. I'm going to launch it. Okay, so the poll is a strange question. So, but either based on data you've seen or what you think is going to happen, why are your agents planning to leave the job in the next 12 months? So we've got unhappy in the job, limited growth opportunities, the money question, the need to make more money, more opportunities elsewhere, more flexibility in scheduling, some who use contact center to launch a different career or other. So again, I'm gonna give you guys 20 or 30 seconds to fill those out. So brilliant, those answers are coming in. I think we're up to 43, which is great. It's looking pretty balanced so far. But always interesting, we've got a bit of a counter trend here to the research, which we love. And we know that sometimes if it's United States focused data, it is a different story, not just in Western Europe, but we've seen some interesting trends when you've looked at engagement when it comes to Gen Z and how well they think they're going to do in their career versus previous generations. If you look at France, UK and US, there's quite a lot of pessimism, but if you go to China, for example, there's a lot of optimism, the complete opposite trends. So I'm going to end the poll. We've got 62 answers, so thank you for that. And I'm going to share the results. So what we've got is, I think the winner is making more money, but we've got unhappiness at very close behind at 90%, contact center as a launch pad. So it's all quite balanced here. So Johnny, again, I'm going to ask you to comment on this. What are your thoughts on those results?
Yeah, so it's not surprising that need to make more money is up there at 21%. But apart from that, it kind of follows what the research said, really, doesn't it? And the one thing that I thought would come in a little bit higher would be the flexible schedule, which is still 15%. But personally, I've noticed that we're doing a lot more of that than what we ever have done in order to try and retain and get that work-life balance right. So I thought that would come in a bit higher.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we because we get a very qualified, engaged audience when we work with CCMA, and so often I'll find when I do these surveys with groups like this, they're very educated around things like flexible scheduling. So that's blatant flattery, by the way, everyone. So let's talk about retention. And Johnny, I know something we've had a chat about this week. So what's going on in your world when it comes to retention?
So personally speaking, attrition kind of this year has been relatively high, and therefore we've been focusing on retaining wherever we can. So kind of the point I made previous in terms of the flexible scheduling, we've been doing a lot of that. The agile working, making sure that we're getting that right and giving agents that option. I think part of it in terms of the attrition that we are seeing, and what one trend that we've noticed is that I think with the pandemic and everything going on, we saw an absolute dip in attrition over that time, which is not surprising. Yeah. And I think now that things are starting to settle down a little bit more, we've noticed people that have either completed courses or done different things, and now they feel it's that time to kind of move on. So we've had kind of quite a high level of genuine attrition, if that makes sense, rather than just being I'm unhappy, or we've just seen it where they've gone, right, thank you, I'm now moving on to something different.
Sort of life-changing stuff.
Yeah. We've had surprisingly, we've had 4 people leave this year that have all gone to be midwives. They've all been going through training. They've all kind of completed at the same time, and they've gone, right, thanks very much. We're off.
Well, midwives are amazing.
They are, yeah.
Changed my life. So, but for the better, I might add. Even though my daughter did lock me out of the house this morning, and I thought I'd be doing this from the phone. Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting angle, and thanks for sharing with that. Graham, what about, you're working across a lot of customers. What have you seen around talent shortages and retention?
Yeah, it's a common theme across nearly every consultancy that we're doing at the moment, is people trying to hang on to staff. And I think it was one of them where a lot of companies previously were probably trying to almost push attrition a little bit. It was trying to be good attrition to kind of remove some of the people that were maybe in jobs that maybe shouldn't have been there before. Whereas now it's kind of the opposite now. Everyone's scrambling around to try and keep everybody. And some of the things that people are doing now and the things that they're offering, they probably wouldn't have dreamed of before. Even some of the bigger organizations that they've been working with are starting to offer things like free holidays or free kind of movements of lunches based on agent performance and stats, like through gamification and things like that. So it's definitely a trend to start. The more you can offer to the agent, the more engaged you get them, and the more they feel like they're part of the company, or we're going to be rewarded for their performance, the more likely they are to try and keep them. So I think there's a big movement towards that a little bit, because obviously anything you can do helps.
Yeah, agreed. And it feels like, as we have this conversation, we're definitely entering a different phase. And the last 2 years, it's not just been one seismic event. I think we're now entering a phase where almost like the things that were advanced, and I've talked to the CCMA for a while about agent engagement, but it's been a relative edge use case. There's been the great companies who did it, but it wasn't. If you think of it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there were certain things you had to do to keep the lights on, and sometimes when you're under cost pressure, you wouldn't do it. Now it feels like we all have to have the environment to make, because that's just almost like getting to the starting point.
Yeah, I think that the clear movement I've seen with that is that the bigger companies kind of that we have, obviously all we're doing gamification and all doing agent incentives and things like that, but the smaller ones were kind of like, well, they just need to turn up because they get paid.
Yeah.
That's changed because they now need to fight to keep them, so they're now having to try and offer alternatives and offer kind of like incentives for that as well. So
I think one thing I've noticed as well is the fact that because it's kind of across multiple areas, the amount of jobs and stuff that are out there at the moment, I think with pay and stuff, we've seen a bit of an increase in that as well, which is adding to the problem as well. So even if you have people that weren't necessarily unhappy, they're suddenly seeing a similar job with a lot more pay. Like a lorry driver, that seems to be a common theme at the minute. Good pay, and that's another thing to add to the pot, if you like.
Yeah, and inflation, just to add that in as well. But let's get off politics for sure. But moving on, we're going to get into productivity here. So, no presentation would be any good without Dilbert. And what was nice going through some Dilbert cartoons for this was actually most were written pre-pandemic, pre-remote working. You'll see by a cartoon in a minute. But we are all working harder than ever. Without doubt. I peaked at 46 meetings, and this week I've got 44. Let's have a look what the data is telling us. So globally, 63% of companies seeing an increase. Not weirdly, the UK is a bit lower, and we're going to discuss really what's that all about. Is that because the UK contact center market has always been very mature? Do we have a specific productivity problem? So we're going to go to the poll. Let's just stop sharing that. Let's go to poll 3 and launch. So very simple one. We're going to use the same data. How has the remote working affected your productivity? So has it increased? Has there been no change, or has it decreased? So I'm going to launch that. Hopefully everyone's got that. And again, please, give us your view on what's happened to productivity. Graham, what do you think from you? Do you seeing the same thing as me? It's just relentless.
Oh, for me, yeah. I'm sure you're the same, Ed, but like for me, because we're now working remote, means that it almost feels like I can fit more into my day because I don't have any traveling time anymore.
Yeah.
I used to be on customer sites, and there would probably be, I don't know, 6 hours a week for traveling, to and from sites and things, probably longer, probably a day a week. That time now is all swallowed up in meetings. So the switch back is going to be interesting, around how much time I lose and what the expectation is around whether I'm going to have to maintain the level of meetings I had before.
Yeah, I agree. And the trends come in. So let me just end the poll. Thank you, everyone. So we've got a couple more coming in nearly. So we've got 58 answers. Let's end that and share the results. I think this is interesting, particularly with Johnny, what I think you might comment on. So we've got 51% saying it's increased, no change 22, decreased 27. So Johnny, we talked again about when we were prepping this about productivity. What's your view of these stats and how has it affected you?
Yeah, so we when we first kind of went to agile working, or actually when we first kind of were fully working from home, we saw an absolute increase in productivity and a reduction in shrinkage as well. And it was like, wow, this is amazing. And we went through kind of a 3 to 4 month period where that was the case. And then gradually it started to kind of catch back up with what we, reduce with what we saw within the contact center. So now we've kind of found that we're at that level now where we probably still get a little bit more productivity for home workers than in the contact center, but it's marginal. There's not a massive amount in that now. And from a shrinkage point of view, there's very little to choose between the two. So we kind of found that initial uplift. We thought, this is amazing. Why have we not done this before? And then now it's kind of settled back down really. And looking at them stats that you had on the previous slide, I'm thinking of moving the contact center to France, 74%.
Yeah, it's impressive, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So let me stop sharing those results and let's move. The question I was going to start with is how do we sustain it? But I think Johnny, what you've said is in some cases it hasn't increased. So let's start there. And Graham, what's your view on the situation across your clients with productivity? Where are we and where do we need to go with it?
So I think this is one of the main elements where WFM can really help, isn't it? Around giving increased visibility of what your agents are doing and kind of and making sure that they're sustaining that productivity and that level of engagement. Because obviously, when you're at home, the amount of distractions are enormous. I mean, in the offices there are loads as well, but you kind of end up with a new routine when you work at home, and it just takes one thing to break that routine a little bit. Like for me, I have 2 kids in the house, and when they come home from school, for some reason, when one of them jumps on YouTube and starts to look at all the videos, it seems to affect my internet connection quite badly, Which is why I was delighted this was at 12 in the afternoon, so I don't have to do it 3 or 4 at night when they come in. But it's things like that can affect your productivity, and I think the WFM side of it, though, can give that visibility and give people a look at kind of where people are at and what's going, and report back the stats that probably you might not see otherwise.
Absolutely. And what about UK productivity? I guess you have a good, working within and without the UK. Have you got a view of why that would be?
So I think from having done deployments in all over Europe and Italy and kind of things, the way they're set up already was probably more geared towards flexible working already. Particularly when you look at some of our Scandinavian customers. I think it's partly maybe to do with daylight, because if you look at Sweden or look at kind of the Northern Hemisphere, they don't really focus on 8/4 as being the times that people want to work. So therefore, because of that, means they're quite flexible around what times of day they've got. That leads towards them being able to use things like preferences and flexible scheduling quite comfortably, and because no one really wants the 8/4. And the problem you've got in the UK is that everyone, when you ask them to pick what shift they want, I can pretty much guarantee 80% of them will say an 8.4 or a 9.5. You know, and that lack of flexibility in the UK could sometimes impact this. So because we're trying to ask people to be more flexibility, they might be more flexible as a result of the changes, might impact upon their engagement towards doing that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. What about Johnny? What about you? Any thoughts about UK versus other countries?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, what Graham said, I definitely agree with in terms of we're probably a bit more rigid and structured compared to others. But it's interesting to see it's quite a big difference as well, isn't it, in productivity compared to the others as well. So it did surprise me a bit about that, really.
Someone actually asked to look at slide 21 again.
Yeah, I just probably saw I was trying to multitask there. There we go. And we'll make these slides available as well via CCMA. But I mean, it reflects working across all those regions. There's it does reflect maturity. But again, you'd always say, yes, with markets like Germany, it's a lot of Excel in Germany. However, markets like the US and India, they are very mature contact center markets. So we probably.
The interesting part there on that one is the fact that the UK has got the biggest amount of decreased productivity. Do you know? The increase is obviously is kind of marginal across a lot of them, and but the thing that stands out for me is that decreased percentage at 34%. That's a lot, and that kind of says, I guess, that there's something that's about the UK workforce, or there's something about maybe we weren't prepared for it in the same way. So it was a bit of a shock for everybody to try and get used to it.
Yeah.
It might be to do with the age of our workforce as well, but that's a different thing.
Dangerous topic.
Yeah.
Lee's already said I'm an old friend. Right, how are we doing for time, Lee? We've got 15 minutes.
That's good.
Yeah, we're all right. It's got a couple of sections. So let's have a look at benefits. I'd never seen this picture before, but it really made me laugh when I found it, which is the guy wearing shorts or pants on Good Morning America and getting caught out. Obviously, I am wearing trousers, just to reassure you if you're worried at all. This is an interesting area because and people like me will often talk about there's benefits everywhere. We're happier, we're more productive, we're cheaper, it's more flexible. So we're going to do another quick poll. We're going to look at just a kind of an angle of what does hybrid mean to you and mean for your business. So is it part office, part home, or is it a contractual thing? Is it self-employed and flexing when you want it? We've really seen, particularly for some retailers, some fundamentally different models they're asking us to do with workforce management. Or is it skill? Is it about the type of work you do, or is it something else? I'm going to launch the poll. And again, thank you for all your participation on these. For me, certainly, it's part office, part home. I'd love to choose what sort of work I did. Johnny, any thoughts about this from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you relate it to the contact center. So I know this is still kind of up for debate in my area, but at the moment, the way that we're currently doing it is we have staff that work from home predominantly about 90% of the time, and they come in a couple of times a month in order for like one-to-ones and catch-ups and stuff. And then we have agents that are predominantly based in the office, and we've used a lot in Calabrio anyway, preferences in order to try and figure that out. So we've actually got agents that don't want to work from home, got no interest in working from home, prefer the office environment, and will stay in the office. And then we've got the opposite side, and then we've got them people in between, and trying to put something in that measures productivity and trying to keep it consistent and fair across the board. The contact center is quite difficult.
Yeah, I think KPIs have evolved multiple times really in the stages we've been through. Initially when we were doing webinars, then it was like we had to completely rethink our KPIs because they weren't relevant anymore. And now we have to, build a new set of that. Graham, have you seen anything like that where people have had to, evolve the way they measure and plan a contact center more frequently than they normally would?
Yeah, one of the things that keeps coming up at the moment is that, and it's quite an interesting question, this one, what does hybrid working mean for your business? Because that's what it means right now. What it means in a year's time will probably be a lot different. And I would expect things like contractual and skill preferences to have a much higher percentage, because they're the sort of things you're going to have to start offering people to keep them. You know, because contractual can be the design of shifts, so that they've got split shifts in the middle of the day, or they're working at various points. And if you look at kind of like the Australian model now, they have a lot of like casual workers where it's hourly staff, you know, kind of where they will be scheduled into the hot spots of the contact center. And they might have another job, which is the skill preference, and they might nominate what that preference is, but whatever the business requirement will still always be king. And I think that as we start to move into a world where people are more working at home, this tied to one fixed shift of 9-5 or 8-4, or that length of shift is kind of probably no longer going to be valid. It's going to be a case of number of hours across a period of time. And when them hours are getting scheduled will be related to the WFM, and what skills they've got will also be related to the WFM and what skills they have and what they would like to do. You know, so
I agree. I think we're going to see a clash of what companies want, and their cost base, what employees want, coming together, and what technology is going to enable.
Yeah, and again, coming back to what we said at the start, that the key to getting that right is going to be making sure that the agents feel that the decisions are fair around what they're getting, you know, so that people feel that everyone's had a fair crack of the whip with it, really. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, the trend is quite clear at the moment. It's part office, part home. So thank you, everyone, for participating in that one. I'm gonna move past this one because I want to get to the last section, to be honest, and talk about flexible scheduling, because I think it's a really meaty topic to get into. So this data I like because it actually was pre-pandemic, and this is between 2005 2015. 94% of net new jobs were non-traditional. No, not traditional. What we're talking about there is that continuum of full-time to managed service to freelancers to gig to crowd to you know, hourly contracts and all of that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our final poll, and we want you to share with us what sort of schedules you're using. So, you know, is it flexible with variable start times, flexible with agent preferences, bidding, fixed, rotational, or a combination of some of the above? So I am going to launch this one. Hopefully that's there. And this is the last piece of work I'm going to ask you to do. Thank you for all your hard work and input today. We will make sure we've captured these and shared them with you. I don't think I've missed any questions. Let me just check. No, I think we're good. Okay, I'll just give you another 10 seconds and then we can comment on these. Coming to 30 seconds, that's 51 answers. That's brilliant, thank you. Okay, I'll share the results. So the big trend is combination followed by rotational. So Johnny, any thoughts on that data?
Again, that's not surprising. That's exactly what we do. Is a combination of the lot. I think we've moved away already from that world of going, well, it's just fixed, or we just do this, or we just do that. We have to make sure that we're trying to, especially with attrition and retention, that we're offering different things. So, you know, we've got different departments that we do completely different scheduling for each department, and we try and make it more bespoke for the department as well as the agents, as well as trying to keep that fairness in mind as well. So it's becoming, from our point of view, it's just another thing to have to try, and it's another complexity to add to the scheduling on top of what was already a tough gig.
Pretty complex work.
Yeah.
Well, let's stop sharing that. Let's come to the last bit of discussion. So the combination, I probably will include for most people some sort of flexible scheduling model. But I'll start with you, Graham. What do you see as the benefits of flexible scheduling?
Well, it depends what you mean by flexible scheduling, but there are multiple, in the sense that if implemented correctly, you cover the business requirements without you cover the business requirements, you make sure that every agent has a fair distribution of shifts, and that everyone feels engaged and involved in them shifts as well, so that everyone kind of is singing from the same hymn sheet, really. I think if you get it wrong, with like kind of too many people on fixed working agreements, you know, where they've got too many part-timers who've had certain agreements and things, people tend to feel that that's unfair, you know. Yeah. One of the benefits of like things like preferences or shift bidding and things like that is that as long as you get that right with the percentage of people who get what they're requesting in that, then it can make everybody be kind of more engaged and kind of like where they're working because they get the hours they want to work, you know.
Absolutely. Johnny, what about you from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we definitely found is that the amount of flexible working requests that we had coming in kind of in the last kind of 12 months as people kind of reevaluate, you know, their working lives and stuff and what's going on. We've had to move to we was fairly rigid, to be fair, model to a load of different kind of flexible scheduling models, and the preference is one we use quite a bit in Calabrio, and we find that works really well. And actually a lot of the flexible working requests that we have, instead of having kind of that fixed thing in place for that individual, will use that preference-based scheduling to try and satisfy that need and try and keep that fairness across the operation as well. Because otherwise you tend to have a thing where if one person puts it in and goes, I don't want to do a late on a Friday, there's 5 or 6 more that come in asking for exactly the same thing from the same team. So trying to get that balance right, and as well as doing what you can for the agents, which is key, and making sure that they're kind of they understand that there's business needs, but you're doing what you can to try and deliver both.
Yeah.
I guess other big benefits of hybrid working, I guess, as well, they'll all come down to costs, don't they? You know, if you've got your staff predominantly working at home and you've got a fixed agreement where they're in a percentage of the office, that means you don't need as many seats as you had before.
Yeah.
So there's an actual physical cost of having that infrastructure there that you don't need anymore, which you can then reinvest, hopefully, into improving the lives of the agents, you know, and to kind of do things differently.
And with that in mind, Graham, what do we need? What sort of infrastructure do contact centers need to deliver it?
I think there's an kind of one of the things you need to be aware of is the awareness of the tolerances that flexible working or hybrid working can create. Because before, where they were in the office and it was very much a case you could look over and see where people were, there are now these kind of almost like bandwidths, like kind of where you need to almost try and gauge what the upper and lower limits are and what you can accept to be for that. You know, and I think you need to almost plan for best and worst case scenarios. So scenario planning is really important now, because you need to understand what could be in the worst case scenario and what could be in the best, and find the right point in between. If you just do one plan, then you're probably not doing enough.
I think that's fair. I think when we've kind of redesigned the KPIs and stuff for agile working, instead of just doing kind of a set target and that's it, it's kind of within a range now. If you're within that range, then we're okay. If you're within this range, you're amazing. If you're in this range, then you've got some work to do, and it's more kind of flexible with that now, rather than just being that is the target. Why are you not hitting it?
Absolutely. So we got one question, and then we're going to have to a couple of questions actually. Thank you. Firstly is how do you plan how many seats you need? Is it 2 to 1, 3 to 1?
I guess that depends on what sort of flexible agreement you agree with the agents. You know, if you've agreed a model where you know the percentage, then you should know the number of seats you're going to require at any point through the day. Particularly if you've got a WFM system where you can mark an activity as being in the office or in seat, requires seat, so that you can count how many people you're physically going to need in the office. Again, 2 or 3 to 1 depends on the different businesses. Will have different expectations around and different bandwidths, again, like I said, around, you know, whether people are going to be in or not from sickness and shrinkage and things like that. So
yeah, and I think it's key having the visibility so you can look at different models of that as well. Johnny, last question we've got here. I think you've talked about the banding with KPIs, but are you using any different KPIs now you've got a hybrid situation?
I think we're not using any different KPIs than what we did. Apart from that, one thing we have done though is that some of the KPIs that were probably seen wrongly or rightly as less important have come more to the forefront. So like adherence, for example, where that was almost like, well, actually, if we're hitting these others, adherence is like here or there. Now that we've got the flexible working and people working from home, adherence plays a lot bigger part within that KPI. And for us, kind of agencies, bonuses and stuff like that for the agents is not just you've done this many sales and that's that. It's a number of different things now. AHT, we have calls per hour, things like that. There's just a lot more focus on them stats, where historically it would have been a bit more like, okay, it's not amazing that we're not in them, but actually this part is more important. Now it's like it's the whole package that matters.
There's a good battle. There's a good battle there, isn't there, around the difference between, because HT would normally be a metric that if you'd thrown at home working, say 5 years or 10 years ago, it would have been the one we probably all hammered the most.
Yeah.
Because it's the one you can measure productivity with. But now the drive is more towards CX, and making sure that customers are still engaged as much as the agents, and that means that opens up the kind of discussion on adherence more, because that's how you then make sure that people are in at the right time, and then you can monitor the AHT as a metric that you can then use to create how many staff you need and monitor it that way to deliver that customer experience. So it's kind of there's a whole shift in picture in KPIs as well as a result of it, and depends on I guess it depends on the kind of culture within each organization. And again, that's key for hybrid working, is getting the culture right.
Absolutely. And there's a whole webinar about how analytics can be used as well. But unfortunately, I have to close off or I'll get in trouble. So this quote, it will be attributed to Mark Twain, but it isn't. It's not really him. But it's a great quote, which is, the two most important days in your life, the day you were born and the day you discover why. And what I love about this story is the fact that our business, our contact center business, was permanently elevated by the pandemic. So that's one of the few positives. So that is everything that we wanted to share. There's my contact details and Graham's contact details. And I'm sure, Johnny, you can contact on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch with him. But Lee, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. That has been a fascinating journey. You packed so much into that. And yeah, you're not that old. Thank you so much. And I love that video right at the start. As I said to you, when I saw it the first time, it actually brought a tear to my eye. It just felt so real. Thank you so much. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Johnny, for giving up your time as well to go through all of that fantastic content. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As I say, we've got loads coming up. So please do check out the website, ccma.org.uk, and come and join us again soon. Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you, Graham. And thank you, Johnny. Take care. See you all soon.